And firstly, I suppose just as a congratulations to Colin, Joanne, Mindy, and Louise. First of all, as Damien said, for bringing together an amazing group of businesses under the Ireland Together banner. It's been great for me to see, and I suppose other businesses to see, such a positive and proactive approach to the current crisis. And as Damien said, it's really grown up through COVID, and this organization has really grown strong. I think what's really nice about it as well is it just genuinely seems to be a group of people that are really trying to help each other out. And there's no kind of agenda there to, like, you know, you should pay a membership fee, or we're trying to build up funds in the background or whatever. It does seem like a truly genuine membership of businesses together that really want to help each other out. So fair play to all of you for getting it going and for helping it to grow up over these challenging times. So,
Thank you, Fergal.
no bother. So today's talk is going to be about, as it says there on screen, making every marketing euro work. But it's really about, I suppose, the dangers of using feelings rather than fact when we're doing our marketing and making marketing decisions in our business. Hopefully today you'll get some insights into the best advertising practices of the world's top brands that will help guide your own decision making in your own businesses. And finally, we'll show you the data-driven processes that we use to help the SMEs that we deal with to get the best return on their own advertising spend. So to give you a bit of context just on me and the business and a little bit of background, I've worked with probably at this stage thousands of SMEs over the last 25 years. And the main objective of my role in that has been to help small businesses to improve their advertising return on investment. So when we set up the business initially back in 2015, BuyMedia, we noticed there was a real unfairness in the market. And one of the main reasons I set up the business was because I saw that this unfairness existed. You've got the likes of Procter & Gamble, and this is a Procter & Gamble ad here. One of their brands are Gillette, and this is a typical kind of like big superhero Gillette advert. They've got a real unfair advantage when it comes to advertising over small, medium enterprises. You know, they have a huge budget. Procter & Gamble's advertising budget alone is 7 billion every year. They have a huge amount of historical insights, so they can draw on all the past history of Procter & Gamble products to give them insights into future behavior. They've got a huge amount of resource in their marketing department. They've got advertising agencies coming out their ears. They've got all the competitive analysis and data that they need to make the right decisions on where to advertise, where not to advertise, all the latest software and technology, and more time and resources than any small, medium enterprise could ever wish for. The type of businesses that we deal with look more like this. They're not the big burly superheroes, but we feel that they are the real superheroes of the economy. The problems that they have when it comes to advertising and the unfair disadvantages that they have is the budgets are much smaller. They have little or no data, limited resources, few marketing people, or maybe no marketing people in the business at all. It could be the owner themselves is doing all the marketing and advertising, no competitive analysis, no software to help them along the way, and very limited time and resources, because as a small medium enterprise owner, they're running 101 other things in the business, and advertising is probably one of the last things that's on their mind. The other piece that we realized when we were looking at this problem or challenge for small medium enterprises, the market itself is really inefficient. So if you are a business trying to do an integrated advertising campaign, it's really important that businesses try to do that, because it's not just about doing, say, digital, or it's not just about doing Google ads, or not just about doing social or print or radio or whatever it may be. It's about how can we mix those channels together to give the business the most effective advertising campaign, to get them the best return on their advertising, so it drives more customers to the business and they grow their business. And so integrated campaigns are really important, because they're the way that a small medium enterprise can maximize that return on the investment that they do. Now, the problem again, and the challenge for the small medium enterprise, is this is a really hugely manual process. So if you want to do this integrated type campaign, you have to talk to all the print publications, whether that's local, regional, or national. You've talked to all the radio stations, again, local and national. You have to go through all the social media channels, all the possible online news media channels. So there's probably, in Ireland alone, there's probably about 700 different media titles or options that you could opt for when you're trying to do this integrated advertising campaign. So for a small medium enterprise, it's really, really difficult to do that because of that manual, time-consuming, pain in the ass process. So I wanted to start with a kind of a bit off the kind of the wall kind of start, but it's Claudius Ptolemy, and Ptolemy was one of the original scientists, I suppose, that looked at the problem of mathematics and how mathematics could solve problems in society as a whole. And Ptolemy was a big expert around map making, and he was one of the first map creators that actually gave accurate maps that were based on data rather than just kind of like little blobs of information that were on pieces of paper that no one could actually use. So Ptolemy was able to, investment in maps and accurate data then around maps was really driven by business and commerce at the time, because commercial organizations needed to get their product from one place to the other through shipping or transportation, and they needed accurate maps to be able to do that in a more cost-effective way. Now, today, we obviously take for granted all this kind of the previous history of map making, and we have highly data-driven maps, and thanks to data, we can get from A to B. We know exactly how long it's going to take us, which is the fastest route. And even when we're in an unknown city, we can navigate very easily if we've got access to the likes of a Google Maps type software. And it's pretty amazing when you think about the technology and how far it's come. But this rudimentary, I suppose, transformation in maps was all driven by having highly accurate guidance devices in our pockets, and also the access to the data that could drive the maps. And we still have the options. You know, you can take out a paper map, you can still navigate by paper, you can still decide if what the right way is to go. You can waste your time getting lost and trying to find your own way. But why would you do that when you can actually have a really accurate way to find your way much quicker, and a tool like Google Maps to get you around the place? And the reason I speak about maps is because we believe that finding the route to your customer is very much like finding your way on a map. And except today, it's a far more complex to find the right customers than it is to find your way on a map. It's because the customer journey today it's really meandering, and it's loads of stop off points. And Google calls these micro moments along the purchasing journey. And there's also hundreds of route options that your customer could take. So the danger of using kind of your own instinct or your perceptions when it comes to your advertising or your marketing is that you take a wrong turn, you miss opportunities, and you miss potential customers. And because many SMEs lack the resources when it comes to advertising, it's like trying to find your way on this really complex journey while your head is buried in the ground. You've little or no data to help you drive the advertising decision-making. So the default position is generally to do either nothing or to do the same as advertising or marketing as you've done year after year. And what we found is when trying to make the right advertising or any business decision, in fact, you really have to protect yourself against your own brain's biases. Because what the brain will try to do is you should always try to make data-driven decisions. We found the biggest blocker to a business that we will be dealing with to make more data-driven decisions is trying to get them to move away from this intuitive decisions that they've been making year after year as business owners or managers themselves, and to look more at the data and to believe more in the data. Now, just to give you an idea on the biases piece, so we've looked kind of really extensively into these kind of brain and psychology biases that people have when making decisions in general, and specifically then around marketing and advertising. This is a guy called Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist and an economist, and he's notable for his work on psychology around judgment and decision making, as well as behavioral economics. And he was awarded a Nobel Prize for economics in 2002, even though he's a psychologist. And through a series of in-depth experiments, Kahneman found that the bias in the brain was often our own worst enemy when making complex decisions. And from the years of research that he's done and experimentation, Kahneman discovered that the brain is divided into two systems. So we've got a system 1 part of the brain and a system 2 part of the brain. And in his book, the system 1 brain is explained, or the system 1 part is explained as the fast thinking or the intuitive piece of the brain. And the system 2 is the slow and the analytic piece of the brain. And while system 1 is mostly right because it's kind of built on our own experience and our intuition, but sometimes the quick judgments that we make through the system 1 part of the brain can lead to really bad decision making or wrong conclusions. The system 2 tends to be the really lazy part of the brain. You know, it's analytical, but it also takes up a huge amount of energy for the brain to do that analytical piece. So what it tends to do is it offloads many of its decisions that it should be making onto system 1. So therefore we make very quick, intuitive, fast decisions, which may not necessarily be right. So the relinquishing of this responsibility from system 2 to system 1 is known as cognitive ease, or assuming that something is true because it seems to be familiar. So here's an example. And don't think too much about this one now. A bat and a ball costs €1.10. The bat costs €1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? So 80% of university students will say 10 cent. I'm just immediately looking at it, like when you just think of the problem, they immediately just say 10 cent. But actually the actual correct answer is it's 5 cent for the ball, because that gives you the 10 cent, the €1 differential, and bringing the total to 1 cent. So it's just, and what had happened there is if you kind of thought 10 cent immediately or instinctually, that was your system one brain kind of working out that problem quickly, rather than the analytical brain trying to actually figure it out. So what's the danger of the cognitive ease piece? So in a marketing or an advertising context, it's important that you're aware of how the brain can make these really important decisions. And so, for example, if you've always advertised, in your local radio station, the rates, you like the media person that you deal with in there, you listen to the station yourself, so you obviously assume that all your customers listen to it. So then when it comes to making a decision on where you advertise your business, the easiest way, or the cognitive ease piece, is I'll just go with something that I know, because it's just easier to do it that way. And the system one brain kicks in, convince you that it's probably the best decision. The alternative to that is, it's really hard, because if you bring it to the system two part of your brain, what that means is I actually have to go and I have to analyze 600 different media titles in Ireland. And I have to figure out where my customer are in those 600 titles. What's the demographic of each of those media titles are, and does that match up with the ideal customer that I'm targeting? That's hard. So the obvious thing that business owners generally do is they use the system one part of the brain. They just say, you know what, I know this one, so I'll go with that. And it's generally not always the right decision. So 80% of our time, our lazy system two brain will advise the system one brain to just do what we've always done, and it just makes it easier for the brain. The other part, one of the other biases that Kahneman explores in the book is loss or risk aversion. Now, generally, people may see themselves as like fairly adventurous, or like I'm willing to take a risk, and particularly in business, business people generally seem to be more more willing to take a risk. But real people don't actually value gains as much as they do losses. They don't assess them equally. For example, we hate losing money more than we like winning the same money. And Kahneman, in the book, they did a golfing experiment, and they examined thousands of golfers over a long period of time. And they looked at specifically the putts in golf. And they were looking at the time that when golfers were putting for par or they were putting for a birdie. And the majority of the time, the statistics showed that the golfer was more likely to make the par than they were likely to make the birdie. And the reason for that is because the golfers were more afraid to lose a shot by not making par than they were about to gain a shot by actually making the birdie. So in general, again, our brains are designed to not take these risks that we maybe should. We look at maybe options or opportunities that are out there, whether it be in advertising or marketing, that we feel are risky or could cause us a loss. And again, we'll just tend to go with the less risk averse option. So therefore, from an advertising point of view, we stick to the same plan as we did year after year. And as Einstein said, insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting to get different results. So one of the other biases that's important to note from an advertising context is availability bias. And availability bias means that you judge something as either more important or more true based on how easily it is for your brain to bring up examples of it in your own mind. So again, in an advertising context, we could say that we have an availability bias towards maybe social media channels because we're on them ourselves every day. They become part of our daily lives. Lots of people we know talk about them, and particularly for business, business people today talk a lot about how they use social media for business quite a lot. So, and there are success stories, and those success stories are probably quite visible to us as well because we are on social media so much. So again, our availability bias would be to move our advertising maybe more towards social media because we see a lot of people that we know that are on there. We hear a lot of success stories, and therefore we hang our bias on that. Confirmation bias then is your system one brain tries to intuitively confirm beliefs that you already have by searching memories in your brain that confirm what you want. So if I asked you, do you think, or somebody asked you, is such and such a really friendly person? You'll automatically start to think of memories that you have of that person when they were really friendly. But then if somebody asks you equally, is that person really angry person, you just start to think of things. I can remember times when they were actually really angry. So your confirmation bias is your brain just looking into its memory banks to see if it can confirm things that that the argument already knows. So again, to give you an example, so the human tendency then is you have blind spots, and it's called, so what you see is all that there is what Kahneman calls it in the book. And what it does is it leads to basically overconfidence in your beliefs on the basis of very weak evidence. And the memory, as we know, is kind of not a very good a good evidential based kind of piece of place to go to get this data or to get this information. So for example, if again, using the example, if we have a negative or positive memories around certain types of advertising, so we can get caught in this confirmation bias trap. So we hear businesses saying, you know, a lot, advertising doesn't work for us. And the reason that the advertising doesn't work for us is because maybe they tried advertising 5 years ago and it didn't work for them. And then they have that memory of it. So when they think about advertising again, it's just, it doesn't work for me. Another thing is that they have specific kind of media biases. So print advertising is dead, you know, newspapers are dead. So therefore, again, you're feeding into the memories, or you've read something about that and that's in your memory bank. So therefore it's not going to work for me. The other thing, it can be positive confirmation bias, which is like, I tried Google AdWords once, I got a really good response for it. So Google AdWords is the only thing that works for my business. So you just do Google AdWords all the time. So the confirmation bias is again something that we really need to be aware of, because it can either confirm negative feelings towards particular types of media when you're thinking of advertising, but also put positive confirmation on things that maybe not necessarily are as positive as they should be. The other thing then, base rate neglect versus statistical thinking. So very quickly, I'm not going to get, there's a load of these, I'm not going to get into too much detail on these ones, but basically your brain ignores the base rate details, and it ignores statistics. And what it does is it just, it takes intuition over statistical thinking. And just to give you an example of an experiment, they asked a group of universities, or a group of people, to say a particular student was called Tom. They gave them no information about the student called Tom, and they said, Tom is going to college. What courses does he do? What course is he most likely to do in college? And what generally people did was they just ranked these courses based on what the most popular courses they thought were. So that was the base rate. So they ranked them based on, you know, what most popular. So like humanities might be more popular than, say, computer science or engineering. So they said he was more likely to do humanities because that's kind of the most popular courses in those universities. But then when they gave a little bit more information about Tom, so Tom is intelligence, he's good with numbers, and he's a little bit nerdy. More people said that Tom actually was more likely to do computer science or engineering than the other courses, because they used the bias about the information about Tom to influence what they thought Tom should be doing in college. So when they were given the additional information, they automatically weighted their bias towards computer science and engineering. Even though statistically Tom was still as likely to do the more popular courses, they biased it because there was a little bit more information. So the system one has an association with the type of person Tom is and what courses he should study. And again, this is relevant when you're thinking about advertising or marketing your business, because of the decisions, and we see it all the time. So a customer will come to us, or an advertiser will come to us and say, our ideal customer is female, she's 25 to 35 and she lives in Dublin. So where we generally used to do all our advertising, say, either in the likes of evoke.ie or her.ie, because we felt that was a more of a female based audience. But actually when you look at the data, it could turn out that the independent.ie, because it has a much greater number of actual audience to begin with overall, may have a greater proportion of that 25 to 35-year-old female as part of their overall audience than these niche publications. So you have to be really careful, again, that you don't let these biases come into your decision making when deciding where to place your advertising. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect is, we've all heard the phrase, you know, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And there was two behavioral psychologists called Dunning and Kruger, and they wrote a beautifully titled paper called Unskilled and Unaware of It, How Difficulties in Recognizing One's Own Incompetence Leads to Inflated Self-Assessments. So that basically brews down to thinking that you know more than you actually do about particular things. So you might have a mediocre knowledge around advertising or marketing, and because you have that mediocre knowledge, you think you know everything about advertising and marketing, and no one else can tell you anything about advertising and marketing because you know it all. And the danger of people with this Dunning-Kruger effect is that they can't be convinced otherwise, and they can never grow. They never have a growth mindset, and they don't kind of think of other opportunities. So they're always stuck in that mindset of this is what I've always done. I know it works for me. I'm just going to continue doing it. So they don't recognize that there might be weaknesses in their biases within their brain. So they're really kind of dangerous people. So if you've ever come across kind of sort of know-it-all type of business people, they're probably suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. They don't think that they don't think anyone can tell them otherwise. But the best thing is obviously if you can bring them data and logic to try and convince them. Still going to be really hard, but that's probably the best way to do it with those type of business people. There's loads others. I'm just going to quickly flick through them, and I'm just doing this for effect, just to show you how many biases that we have in our brains that really affect all the decisions that we make. So there's an effect heuristic, there's regression to mean, there's anchoring, there's the halo effect. So a huge number of biases that we carry around with us in our brains every day based on our previous experiences and our intuition. And we tend to draw on them because, again, the system 2 brain is lazy, and it just says, look, let the system 1 deal with that, and let our system 1 part of our brain make the decisions. So if you take anything away from today, I hope it's that we all have to use the data and insights to protect ourselves from ourselves. And I've worked in the advertising business for 25 years, and I've to consciously every day mistrust myself and put my trust in the data. Because when you're helping clients and a client says, you know, I think that our customer should be in, is in this publication, or is listening to this radio station, or is on this website, you kind of think, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's sort of like that. I could see that. I could see how that would work. And your own kind of experience feeds into that as well, because you may have had a good experience with a particular advertiser on a particular media title as well. So I have to constantly battle with that and just make sure that, look, everything we do is data driven, so we can help our clients make the right decisions based on the data rather than what we think ourselves. So we've discovered ourselves that by using simple algorithms, it generally outperforms experts on a daily basis. We'll ask people what they think, we'll run it through the data, and and then run the experiment, and in general the data will outperform the experts. So to give you an example of that, simple algorithms frequently outperform experts. In 1974, psychologists Howard and Dawes did a study which found that a simple formula could actually predict marital happiness better than relationship counselors could. And so here's the algorithm. And the algorithm is, if you add up the number of times you make love minus the number of times that you argue, and if you get a positive figure, it means that you're more likely to be in a healthy marriage. And if you get a negative figure, you're more likely to be heading for separation or divorce. So a very, very simple formula that these guys worked out, and was a really good indicator over the experts of future relationships. But we can also use these biases for our own advantage in our businesses when we're advertising. So repetition equals truth is another thing that Kahneman looked at, and he found that advertisers and marketing people use this a lot. So the more you repeat something, you know, the more people believe it, even if it's not true. So that's why you have things like slogans, you know, like just do it, I'm McDonald's, I'm loving it. So all of these slogans that you hear over and over and over again, whether they're true or not, your brain just believes that because I've heard this a lot and because I'm familiar with that, it must be true. So therefore you can use these biases as well to help to influence your potential customers when it comes to doing your own advertising. The next piece then is, I just wanted to share with you about a really interesting experiment that Google did recently, and they've only released the data in the last couple of weeks. So they conducted an experiment which was to see if they could influence buyers away from their favorite brands. So they did about, I think there's about 40 brands that they did the experiment on, and everything from cars down to like cereals, breakfast cereals. And what they found was that by bringing in these 6 biases into the advertising piece, so the category, the power of now, which is, you know, you need to get it now; social proof, which was, there was a lot of social kind of testimonials, people talking about the brand; scarcity, so, you know, you got to get it now before it's gone, there's only a few of these left; authority, which was, you know, a trust pilot thing or something like that, or someone that was an authority on the area talking about your brand or this particular product, giving it positive results; and the power of free, you know, here's a free download before you actually have to buy the software. So by using these 6 things together in advertising, they were able to switch people. They weren't able to just switch people away from, say, their first favorite brand down to their 5th favorite brand, but they were able to switch people from their first favorite brand down to an imaginary brand. So in the case of the cars, they had, like, say, for example, the person's favorite car was Mercedes-Benz. They created an imaginary car brand. I think it was called Tika. and they use this advertising pieces as part of that brand advertising, and they randomly put it out to this group of people who didn't know they were being experimented on, and 70% of the people moved away from their favorite car brand to look at a purchasing decision for this imaginary brand that didn't even exist. So again, we can use these things and these biases, and we have to be aware of these things when we're doing our advertising, that you can actually have a huge influence on people's buying behavior by using the power of their own brains almost against them. But for ourselves, what we should realize is, knowledge is power. It's like the important thing for us is to know these things, when we're going to do these things, that we have these biases, that our potential customers have these biases, that we can influence them. And as Kofi Annan says, continual education is the premise of progress in every society and every family. So we need to, when you don't have the knowledge and you don't have the information when you're making decisions, you default to that instinctual perception and, I think, I feel, and that's never a good place to be when you're making a decision that's important to your business. So let's see what can happen when even the top advertisers and marketers use instinct and perception rather than data and fact. Now, Ubiquity are the leading independent source of media information. They do, if after this, go onto their website if you're interested in kind of media evaluations, really interesting reports that they do. The recent study of 100 of the top spending marketing managers and the top 400 advertising executives, they revealed some really shocking results. The results show there's a real disparity between the evidence and what the top marketing and advertising experts perceive to be true. So the data based on evidence from Ubiquity reports showed that the best performing advertising media for businesses was, and this is just in order, so respectively was TV was number 1, radio was number 2, newspapers number 3, magazines number 4. So they were the top 4 across all categories of advertisers, across all types of businesses. They were the ones, the top 4 that got the best results. But when they asked the advertisers or the advertising experts and the marketing managers of some of the top brands in the world to rank, what they thought were the best performing advertising medium, you can see here that some of the things actually, some moved down and some moved up. So whereas magazines was previously ranked number 4 in terms of effectiveness on the evidence, it was ranked number 10 in terms of the perception of the marketing managers. Things that moved up then, so online video was ranked at number 9, but actually moved up then to number 2. So they thought was the second most important advertising medium. So again, it's just to show the example that it's not just business owners and people that don't know a lot about advertising and marketing that make these errors in judgment, but also the experts themselves. There is perceptions of certain media out there, and so even if you go to an expert and you ask them their advice, you're not necessarily getting the right advice, because again, that advice could be based on their bias. So you have to be really careful, make sure that they're using data rather than their own perceptions. Again, this is just showing some of the movements up and downwards, so I won't go into that too much. And this one shows that the cost element. So again, they were asked to rank it in terms of what they thought one was most effective. This was in terms of cost. So what was the cheapest? What was the cheapest type of advertising? So social media ranked top amongst the advertisers and the agencies. They thought social media was the most cost effective, but actually the evidence showed that radio was the most cost effective in terms of the advertising spend. So again, just to be careful of perceptions against data. And this is just a breakdown of from most cost effective up to least cost effective, radio being the most cost effective, direct mail being the least cost effective in terms of advertising spend and return on investment. And this is just even some research we've done ourselves on our own clients through BuyMedia. We found that this is to graphically show how advertisers spending the same amount of money, and again back to kind of the earlier piece about integrating of your marketing and your advertising plans, the effect that advertisers got by spending the same budget across a number of different titles. So the first bar here is if an advertiser did one advertising channel. So for example, they just did radio, they got a certain uplift in their business. But if they use radio and social, they got a 19% increase. But the maximum effect was if they were able to combine 5 advertising channels together, they were actually getting a 35% better return on investment than they were by just using one channel. And again, it's using the exact same budget, but it's just spreading it across multiple channels. And the reason we believe that, and from talking to some of these advertisers, is they just don't have the time, they don't have the resources to do it themselves in-house, so they aren't able to do that all that investigation to see what are the right 5 channels for them, so they stick to the 1 or the 2 that they know. And the key, again, from a competitive point of view, is when you're thinking about your own business or your own business clients, is only 8% of small medium enterprises are actually doing that 5-channel strategy. So there's a huge opportunity there for small medium enterprises to do more of that and get a competitive advantage over your competitors. But again, it's important what to measure. So again, like, what do you measure when you're actually starting to do advertising? So based on this here, you know, the marketing guys are back in the office and they're measuring the mobile. The purchase takes place. The guy gets the flyer in his letterbox about the shoe. He sees a poster with the shoe on it. He sees an online ad with the shoe. He hears a radio ad with the shoe on it. The shoe is on TV when he's watching a program between the ad breaks. And he's online on his mobile and he taps on buy the shoe. And the marketing guys are measuring and they say, oh, look, mobile is the one that's driving all our revenue because that's where everyone's buying. But actually it was obviously the influence of the other media channels as well that were having an influence on the final purchasing decision. So it's really hard to know what to measure, but you have to measure something. So it's better to measure than not measure at all. And so what we do is we try to take a big picture, helicopter view. Everything is connected. Start wide and then start to tighten down the focus. So start with a helicopter view of your market and your advertising and your customer, and then try to narrow it down to a very specific customer that you're trying to look at. What we do is we look at kind of even sort of regional variation. So we use things like Google Trends to look at if you have a particular product, and we just did this one was hair, bread and garden, just kind of the trends over time. And you can see there, this measures from the start of the original lockdown, which was March the 12th, I think. And you can see suddenly the trend was pretty steady across the board for the whole year up until March the 12th when lockdown, and suddenly hair, bread and gardening went through the roof and everyone was searching all over the place for bread recipes and where was I going to get my hair colored and how was I going to do the garden. And so all these things changed over time very quickly. So, but it's important again for your own business to know these things and know these trends and know where things are going. Also, you can do regional breakdowns. So with Google Trends, it's really, these tools are all free for you to use. So you can go on, you can look at the search criteria for certain regions, are there certain regions that are more into it than others? Is there any difference if your business is targeting a particular locality? Is there a reason why one particular search term is more important in that area than others? So, and also things like then, finding out where the search criteria are and related queries to those. So having that kind of, I suppose, overview before you even do any advertising in terms of search terms and where people are searching, what they're searching for, and what the volume is in different areas as well is really important. We've just recently become members of the Institute of Practitioners, so we would use then industry data as well. So that's kind of your your own free stuff, your Google stuff that you can use yourself. We'd also use then industry data to kind of feed into the algorithms that we use to help our advertisers to make the best decisions. And there's two really good pieces of industry data that's, I think, again, they're free online. You can probably download them. The long and the short of it's probably about 80 pages or so. The Effectiveness in Context is a more recent version, and that's a shorter one again. But basically, these two guys, Peter Field and Les Binet, they're known as the godfathers of advertising effectiveness, and they're part of the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising. And there's really good data from them. But what they found over time, again, over about a 15-year period, looking at all the most effective advertising campaigns across all the industries, they found that the split between advertising campaigns should be that you're doing 60% of your advertising should be spent on the branding of the business and 40% of your advertising should be spent on the sales activation. Now, often in small businesses, that's either totally flipped or there's no actual brand building advertising done at all. So most people are doing, you're doing your social media or you're doing your Google AdWords to drive sales into the business or drive website visits, but there's no thought given to, how am I actually building a sustainable business brand here? So again, the split is across the board. It's even technology companies have that 60-40 split. To get the most effective advertising campaigns, you should be putting 60% into your main brand building advertising and then 40% into your sales activation advertising. Then the other industry type of data we use is like Nielsen. So Nielsen can give us kind of like the split then between different channels. So like how effective is an advertising budget going to be if you're looking at TV, if you're looking at press, if you're looking at online, if you're looking at outdoor, and how should that be split between different audiences? So again, we would use this again to try and figure out for our advertisers, if you've got X amount of budget, where should you be actually placing that budget? We also look at, say this is an example of radio, but Ipsos and MRBI, they do a number of reports on a quarterly basis on the listenership and of radio in this case, but also readership, of newspapers, and also like out of home advertising. So again, you can get these reports and they will show you, you know, that your local radio stations, how many people are listening to them on a weekly basis, and also what the trend is over time, whether they're going up or down. So again, really important pieces of data that you can get access to. We also look at the share then amongst between, say, local and national. So if you're looking at targeting, say your business might be in Kerry, is Kerry worthwhile doing local radio station? Yes, it is, because 48.7% of the people in Kerry listen to their local radio station. Whereas if you look at, let's say, Sligo and Leitrim, only 31% listen to their local radio station in Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal. So it mightn't be as effective of an advertising medium to do the local radio station in Sligo as it would be in Kerry, because more people are listening to it. So again, you can look at the regional variations, and again, we've access to all this information to help the advertisers. Then we use your own business data. So, you know, it's important to look at what's going on your own websites, on your own social media, to try and figure out, you know, where your customers are coming from, what sort of activities they have online, where the traffic is built from, so you can get a view of your own business data as well. And that's really important as well, not just looking at the industry and the market, but also looking at what's happening with your own customers. And that can be from, as I said, the previous one was Google Analytics, but this can be from your own Facebook reports, from Twitter ads, from your LinkedIn campaign manager. So there's a huge amount of information out there that you can access to use use more data-driven advertising decisions. And then just to give you I suppose, ethos on how this whole thing fits together. So our 4 pillars of advertising success are: if you do the planning piece right, or make marginal improvements to how you're planning your advertising, which is the bits we've already spoken about, how you make marginal improvements to the purchasing. So again, finding the right audience in the right area for the right price, how you manage those campaigns, and how you learn from them. You know, that's really important. And we speak to so many small businesses that they might do the planning, the purchasing, the managing themselves, but they don't do any learning, and they don't find out like what actually has given us results over the years and what's working and what's not working for us. So that's really important. And even small improvements to these processes have a massive outcome to the return on the investment that you get on your advertising. And just to give you an example, so Ireland Together members come looking for information from us. We would build a persona that's based on your ideal customer. We put that information into Kantar. Kantar builds us a media map. So basically a media map is all of the titles that are available in the country or in your location, whether that's regionally or locally, and then the popularity of those titles with your ideal customer, and also the number of your ideal customer that are either listening to, watching, or viewing that particular media title. So what we create is a media effectiveness score, basically, for your particular ideal customer. We use Nielsen then for competitive analysis, and that's really cool because if you could say, if you know your top 4 or 5 competitors, you can put that into Nielsen, and Nielsen will come back with a report that says, here's your 5 competitors, here's how much they're spending on advertising, and here's where they're spending on their advertising. So again, you can make really much more informed decisions around your advertising by having that information. And then we have a persona builder. We match it with a budget, whatever the budget for your advertising is, and it brings back a result set then that's based on what are the best campaigns across all the different media types. We reserve the campaigns, we schedule the campaigns, just to give you an idea of our process so you can use this yourself. So we have campaign scheduler, we send all the ad copy to all the media channels through our own platform, and we've audited orders that are based on a communication system that are built into our platform as well. And again, the key thing is the learning, so monitoring, reporting, and learning, so you can have feedback for your future advertising decisions. And so what we have is we've got basically curated advertising, we've got really competitive advertising prices, streamlined ad process, and the idea for the small businesses that we save them time and money, but ultimately help them to grow the business. And our ethos is by bringing all the businesses together, but with group buying power, so bringing all the budgets, helping them to buy it more effectively, combining it with what we've just spoken about, which is the market intelligence, the industry data, and the experience, with the knowledge sharing data as well, and putting that into kind of a pot, matching that with the business needs and the insights that the business needs. And the idea is to help you, the small and medium enterprises, or your businesses, to compete with those larger brands that you have to compete against when you're doing your advertising. My ask today from you guys is we need your help. So we're obviously building this platform to try and help do more of this data-driven decision-making advertising for small, medium enterprises. And what we want to do is we're looking for 10 businesses out there that are thinking of planning advertising in 2021. And we want to bring you through the process that we have on our platform and see if it helps you make better advertising decisions. There's no cost or anything. It's completely free of charge. We just want to get your feedback on whether you think what we're doing is helpful for small businesses and whether it's something that could actually have an impact in your own businesses. So that's our ask. So if there's businesses out there that want to sign up, we have a form. I think Mindy's going to share it in the Slack channels as well later on. But you can link into the form and just sign yourselves up, and we'll be in touch for with more details. So thank you very much all for listening. I hope I didn't keep you too long, and I hope you got something out of it, and that you can make more data-driven decisions going forward in your advertising in your businesses.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Fergal. I've learned loads here. I didn't know about all the places you could get data from to make these decisions. So that was great.
Yeah, and to be fair, like we've paid a lot of money for some of the data, but there is a lot of stuff out there that is free. You know, the Google Trends, all the insights into your own websites, all that stuff is free. Even some of the reports, like the long and the short of it, they're all free publications that you can download. Now, if you want to get into it in real depth, then there is, the data is expensive, but we have that linked into our platform, so if anyone can access that free as well. So,
excellent. So, are there any questions from anyone?
Just got one question. So I'm going to play golf in an hour's time. If I'm putting for a triple bogey, does the same logic hold through?
There's no hope for you, Damien, if you're putting for a triple bogey. Your brain will just give up.
I mean, I've always worked on the principle, 50% of the ad spend was wasted. We just never knew which one, right?
Yeah.
I'm now absolutely clear after hearing it time and time and time again, which is all the biases we have and the need to go for data. Okay, Mindy, you might recognize where all those data sources come from, but that's my problem sometimes, is where do you get the data? And I'm not in advertising, so I don't know. Yeah. It's not my active part, right? But that's what when I'd be querying the advertising proposals, it's why don't you have more data? Oh, we don't have it.
Yeah, well, just to give you again, just to, I suppose, drop a few names that you can look into yourself, Damien. So the Institute of Practitioners of Advertising is one that we use. So they've got a data bank, which basically gives you access to a lot of that. Again, even if you're not using this yourself, it'll be good to even challenge some of the people that are coming to you with proposals. Do you use the IPA data bank for your research? Are you using Kantar? So Kantar have a piece of research called TGI Insights, which is basically it's a research project that's ongoing, and it's international as well. But just to give you the Irish context of it, they have 3,000 people on their panel that they interview on an ongoing basis. So it's not like just a one-off piece of research. It's an ongoing behavioral and attitudes survey that they do right throughout the year. So they ask people, from our point of view, the important stuff is they ask them what media do they consume. So what radio stations are you listening to every week? What newspapers are you reading? What online news media channels or websites are you visiting? What social media channels do you use? So that's where we get a lot of our media information from. But it's also really important from a behavioral point of view. So let's say you're a motoring dealership. They'll ask, are you planning on buying a car in the next 12 months? Who makes decisions on purchasing a car in your household? What types of car do you drive currently? So there's a huge amount of information from a financial point of view. Do you have a credit union account? Are you saving in the credit union? What are you saving in the credit union for? So there's a massive amount of information in there that we have access to. The report itself is 600 pages, the annual report, but it literally gives you you could nearly see these people in their houses and what they're doing. You've got so much information on them. So again, we've access to that TGI Insights report. The other one is the Nielsen that I mentioned, which is really great from a competitive analysis point of view. If you're trying to find out what your competitors are spending in advertising, where they're spending it, you can get that report from Nielsen as well. So there will be the three main ones that we use, Nielsen, Kantar, and the IPA.
There is so much information overload. My data head is going to explode any moment. And I know it's funny because I work a lot in digital transformation, and it's all based on people just pulling out ideas out of their head, and they're not data driven, and they're not doing the right analysis and testing. And it's for everything. And the fact that we have access to so much more data than we ever did before. I mean, there should be Damien, you should never ever sign off on a budget without data. There's enough out there. Like, nobody can come up with a plan going, hey, let's just try this. And go, why? What's the market? What is the reason? What are you trying to do? What is the conversion that you expect? What is the return on investment on that spend? So it's all of those questions. But I know if you're not in that space and you don't understand, as especially the startups that I'm working with, they're like, well, we just think it's this, so we're just going to try. And the amount of money spent on agencies through that without informed decisions, and agencies can't know every market and industry. And it's very hard. Like I have a thing with agencies. I've always built out teams and built it out in-house, because I just trust that if we make our own mistakes, we'll fail, but nobody else can know our business the way that we do. So it's understanding those key things, but that doesn't mean you can't ask for help. So no, I think it's phenomenal. Thank you so much for all of that information. I'm actually going to have a look at the forum and maybe pass it on to one or two, because I think a few might actually be really interested, Fergal.
Perfect. Thanks, Louise.
And we should touch base as well, because I think there's an overlap there.
Absolutely.
Fergal, thanks very much for that. It's really interesting. I just have two questions. And one is, when you talk about 5 different channels, you class social media as one of them channels, or can you say like Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook, or is it?
Yeah, in an ideal world, it's the social media is one channel. You know, so what you're trying to do is you're trying to what again, when we do the media map, it's never that, you know, 100% of the ideal customer is on social media. It's usually that, you know, maybe there might be a bias towards social media. So it could be that 35% of the audience is on social media, 25% is on TV, 10% is on radio, 5% is on print. So it's a mix. So the idea of the advertising plan should always be, you're trying to get the maximum amount of penetration to your audience as you possibly can. So if you just go social media, then you're only going to hit the 45% of the customer base that are on social media, but you're missing out on all the other ones as well. And sometimes the other media could be more valuable to you, because they're not tire kickers. They're not people who are just looking for a competition or a free offer from social media. They're actually people who are interested in actually buying your product. So it's important to do the mix. So yeah, but just to answer the question, Donald, we would consider social media as a channel in itself. Now then, when you get into the social media, so what we do is we create a media effectiveness score for each of the channels then. So once you start to dig deeper into the channels, you'll get then, okay, out of the social media media channel, you've got maybe Facebook is 35% of that, Twitter is 15% of that, LinkedIn is 5% of that. Yes. So it breaks it down then more granularly then once you get into the channels of exactly what percentage you're on each. And then very simply in terms of budgetary, you use the percentage to allocate the budget based on the percentage of the audience that are on the individual channels. So it becomes like a maths problem rather than an instinct problem. You know, I think most of my audience are on LinkedIn. Well, show me the figure that shows you that. Yeah. Whereas when you've got the figure and you've got the percentage, and you know that 50% of your audience are on Instagram, and you've got a $5,000 budget to spend, then you should be spending $2,500 on Instagram. It's simple when you break it down into the maths.
Cool, and that makes a lot of sense. And the other question was, have you started looking, or do you look at influencers? How do you include them or rate them in a media plan?
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely, and good question. So that's becoming more and more important for brands and businesses to try and build their brand, and particularly if you've got a niche audience. But what we found, Donald, is what we found is they have a very instantaneous effect. So like if an influencer talks about your product or your brand online, instantly you'll see results. Yeah. But what can happen is if you go too much, again, if you put too much budget into that one channel, you'll start to see this like a peak and trough effect. So it'll just start to go up, down, up, down. So every time they mention something, you get sales. Every time they don't mention something, you get no sales. Every time they mention something, you get sales. Every time they don't mention something, no sales. So you can't build a business like that. So you have to be, again, combining them as part of your mix. It can't be an either or, you know, they're definitely becoming a more important part of the mix. But you will get the peak and trough element rather than building brand equity over time, which is kind of, if you combine that with kind of 60% then more in the kind of brand building area, that's when you see the real effects over time. Yeah, great. That'll be my personal sort of opinion on it as well. I can see that. It's definitely sort of, the peaks and troughs. But interesting, and I suppose you can integrate them with your campaigns and sort of pepper them in whenever. Exactly. Yeah. And again, it's down to audience, you know, it's because we have the audience data, we know what influencers this particular audience are interested in and where they're visiting. So again, it's making the decisions based on well, we know that they're influenced by this particular influencer. It's not that we think they are because they talk about the same things that we talk about, you know. So it's again making those influencer decisions based on data rather than your feelings.
Sounds great. Thanks very much, Fergal.
No problem, Donald.
So Fergal, I have another question. I love the learning bit in your ethos, and the graphs and everything were great. Is this something that
Thanks,
you
Fergal.
find?
Sorry.
Oh.
See you, Damien.
Yeah.
Enjoy the golf.
Is this something that you find that along with not knowing how to find the data as to which channels to use, that SMEs aren't really able to look at the results of that in a way that is truly like data specific?
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's what we find, Mindy, is if a business has a digital focus or a digital marketing manager, they probably have a person that's very good on the digital side. You know, so they'll have all the Google Analytics and they'll have all the return from the Google ads and the conversion rates and all that side of things. But what they don't have is any measurement around the other pieces. You know, what influence is a print ad having, what influence are the radio ads having. So they're not combining all the data together. So again, what will happen is the marketing manager can come to the managing director and say, look, here's my report from my digital campaign. And so therefore they can measure it. So therefore they do it, they do more of it. But what they're missing out on is they're missing out on that brand building piece that's actually having more of a long-term effect on the sales of the business rather than, again, the peaks and the troughs piece. So I've gone into businesses where they don't even know what advertising they're doing, never mind learning about what advertising they're doing. So it's really important that there is a sort of a measurement in place. Again, it's never perfect. You're never going to be able to say 100%, I can allocate 100% of that sale to that particular spend. Like the little cartoon that I showed, you know, there's outside influences on every kind of purchasing decision, and it's a journey that somebody goes through. So you're never going to have one thing that you can pin a purchasing decision onto, but at least if you can measure it and you measure it over time, and you can see kind of, we've done this mix of advertising and it's had this effect on our revenue. We've grown our revenue by 15% by doing this mix of advertising. At least it gives you something then, and it gives you confidence that that advertising mix is working. Whereas if all you do is measure your Google Analytics and your digital side of it, you'll just think that's all that's driving the sales is the digital side of it. But you definitely need that mix. So the learning piece is hugely important. And again, our goal is to kind of make this like an artificial intelligence machine learning piece. So it's taking all the data from not just the individual clients, but it's taking it from the group as a whole. So a bit like if we took the Ireland Together as an example, imagine you had 900 pieces of data coming into a system that was telling you what advertising was working and what advertising wasn't working for 900 different businesses. Suddenly you have a huge amount of information that's really good to share with all those businesses. So that's the idea, is that we build this community of businesses that are sharing data amongst each other and helping each other to grow, a bit like yourselves.
Yes. Excellent.
That's
Thank you so much.
That sounds amazing.
Yes, thank you. I see we're up at the top of the hour now. So unless there's any more questions, I think I can release you all. But Fergal, that was fabulous. Like I said, I've learned a lot, and I actually know you and have been working with you for a bit. So thank you very much.
No bother. Thanks, Mindy. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Fergal.
Thanks, Donald. Talk to you soon.
Be in touch. Bye.
See you, Michael.
Bye.